Good evening, everyone. My name is Martin Cooper, and I'm the president of Randonneurs Ontario and your host for the evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the first Randonneurs Ontario Virtual Symposium. If you are a randonneur or are interested in long-distance cycling or in participating in the next Paris-Brest-Paris, a cycling event that has been run continuously for 130 years, the upcoming presentations will be of great interest to you. Of course, the virtual symposium has been made necessary by the COVID-19 crisis, and randonneuring worldwide has had to adapt to local conditions. Knowing that randonneuring survived the 1919 Spanish influenza pandemic and two devastating world wars gives us the hope that not only will we see the end to the current crisis, but we will emerge even stronger. We have a series of short presentations covering a wide range of topics. Following the presentations, we will have a Q&A with our panel of distinguished and accomplished presenters. Please put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Charles Horslin will collect and collate the questions and present them to the panel at the end of the presentations. The first presentation is on the history of randonneuring and Randonneurs Ontario. It is fitting that Peter Lees is presenting on this topic, as he is one of the longest standing members of Randonneurs Ontario and its former president. He is currently VP of Brevet Administration. He completed Paris-Brest-Paris in 1999 and holds the Canadian men's hour record for 65 to 69. Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks, Marty. As Marty's pointed, thanks for everyone for joining. As Marty's pointed out, Paris-Brest-Paris has been run for about 130 years. It started out as a race and morphed into something that we have today. This year is the 100th anniversary of the first brevet that was ever run under the auspices of Audax Parisienne. I would be here all night going through the history of randonneuring, so I'm going to concentrate on Randonneurs Ontario. The club started in 1983, and it's almost 40 years later for the long road. Next, thank you. The club expanded over the years. Inspired Mike Berry and Mike Brown, inspired by the writings of Jock Wadley, a British journalist who covered races and events on the continent. Mike and Mike decided to take on some of those challenges. The Raid Pyrenees was the first and PBP was the second. In 1981, Mike and Mike successfully completed the Raid Pyrenees. They also learned that to ride PBP, qualifying rides of 200, 300, 400, and 600 Ks would need to be completed with clubs affiliated with ACP. The closest options were BC Randonneurs and the Rochester Club in New York. Neither option seemed to be viable, as getting to the ride starts was problematic. BC was the first club founded in Canada in 1979 by Jerry Pareja, John Hathaway, Dan McGuire, and Wayne Phillips. Mike and Mike, with the assistance of Jerry, applied and were approved to form the Toronto Randonneurs. Brevets were scheduled for 1983, and then riders were enticed to ride. Mike and Mike were so successful at organizing all the bike sport staff qualified, and they had to stay back to run the store. Toronto Randonneurs also successfully completed the first Flèche outside of France in 1985, an honor that we share with Australia. Next slide. The club expanded over the years with the exploits of the members completing PBP from 1983 to 1999, with 90 riders completing the big ride. Toronto Randonneurs had come to a place where changes were needed. After all, Ottawa riders rightfully had a large enough presence to form their own chapter. During 2000, Toronto Randonneurs became Randonneurs Ontario, with Simcoe, Muskoka, and Huron forming their own chapters over the next couple years. Niagara also formed a chapter for a couple years. However, interest waned in that area and the chapter was folded. From 2003 till 2019, we had another 148 members successfully complete PVP. In 2001, a group of club members completed the Raid Pyrenees. This was repeated in 2002, and in 2003, Mike Barry went back to repeat his raid ride. We have gone from route sheets printed out by hand and ridden using a map and your watch to GPS files and bike computers guiding our efforts. Lighting has gone from pitiful incandescent bulbs run by bottle or under bottom bracket generators or batteries to halogen to LED run by batteries or sophisticated hub generators. Still, the rides are arduous and an accomplishment for all who complete them. Our club has grown from the crazy notion of the 2 Mikes to one with 4 chapters across Ontario. We've run the Granite Anvil 1200 3 times, and we enjoy the company of around 120 members. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. The next talk will be on technique, equipment, nutrition, night riding, etc. This will be presented by Erin Marshak, who is the Vice President of the Toronto chapter of Randonneurs Ontario. She's a multiple winner of the club's Beryl Burton Award, architect of the Urban Brevets series, recipient of ACP's Randonneur 5000 Award, and successfully completed Paris-Brest-Paris in 2019. Erin?
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello. So I'm going to be talking about equipment, nutrition, and night riding, all the spooky stuff. It can be really overwhelming when you're first joining Randonneurs, or first doing your first long distance ride. I know I was definitely a little more cautious than I needed with it. So I want to kind of show you how I ride, the things that I've learned, and give you some resources. There's a lot to cover in this set, so I'll try and be quick. Normally, I would be showing you my bike, but this is a picture of my bike right now. This is how I have it set up for an overnight ride. This was a multiple day ride and I had to camp. So you can see that I have gravel tires at the front. At the back, I put in all my camping gear. And on the front, I have my Brevet bag, which is this. And you can see how I crammed everything that I needed into this bike. It's it started off as just a basic mountain equipment co-op bike. If you're in Canada, you would know that. And I've slowly tweaked it throughout the years, but you don't need any fancy custom bike or any kind of really top of the line pieces. As Peter Lease mentioned, Randonneurs have been riding ultra long distances for a century. So pretty much anything that was a bicycle in the past 100 years will do you fine. Just one note, this setup is explicitly for a gravel ride. On most Randonneur rides, at least in Ontario, we're on road. And so I wouldn't be using these knobbly gravel tires. So kind of equipment, what is in my equipment? So I said before, this is the box bag, Brevet bag. It's from Swift that I use to carry all my stuff within it. You can see here, turn it down. It's pretty small, all things considered. And I have my repair kit within there. So what do I have in my repair kit? I'm going to pull it out. I have my replacement tube. I have it all listed out. Here we go. Within there, I have a pump that is normally attached to my bike. And for the rest of the repair kit, it's all kind of crammed into here, which is a little tiny pouch. Looks like a cosmetic pouch. If you have, those work just fine. Within there, I have a bunch of different things that I have found useful along the way. Kind of a Swiss Army knife. This is a Leatherman. I got tire levers, tubes, all sorts of good treats. I ride tubeless, you don't have to. So I have a little tubeless repair kit, but you can see that it fits really small. I have an Allen key set with a chain breaker. So if something happens with my chain, I can, such as it getting stuck in the wheel or the derailleur breaking, I can break the chain and turn it into a single speed, which has happened a few times. If you do that, you might need what's called a magic link here. And these will help you kind of put your chain back together if you need to take it apart for any reason. I've been riding for a few years, and so each time I see something that goes wrong on somebody else's bike, I usually try and ask myself, how would I have solved it? And then try and add it to my toolkit. The other thing that I would say that are most important are tweezers. If you get anything, these are cosmetic tweezers again. If you get anything stuck in your tube, or you want to do your eyebrows in the middle of a ride, it's important. You should have these, and zip ties. Anything can be solved by a zip tie, including, like, I've seen people have rear derailleurs break. And so one of the options you could do is kind of strap the rear derailleur into, again, converting it to a single speed, and keep on riding till the next control where you're nice and safe. I also have a biomechanical repair kit, which this year I've added mask and hand sanitizer for it. But I have sunscreen and Advil in there. I also have Imodium and Polysporin, which are really helpful. And the shiny thing in the back of here is a very cheap emergency blanket. I've very rarely had to use these. I needed to use these once, in which I created a poncho by stuffing it in my raincoat. And so I had a little parka when it was very cold. The other things that I carry with me are computy bits. You don't need these. Again, this is what folks would, thanks, Jason. I'm glad you agree with my eyebrows comment. But these are things that help you. A Wahoo Bolt computer I use. It has a really long battery life. You can always, you do this on paper. If you prefer to go hardcore, Garmin works fine. You don't, people use their phones. Everything is absolutely okay. The benefit of using a GPS and a dedicated device is that it gives you a little ding ding when you're off course. I started just doing it with paper controls, and I definitely got lost and lost a bit of time. I also have a heart rate monitor just from Wahoo. And as you get more and more advanced, you might want to, your loved ones might worry about you being alone in the woods. So for my partner, I have a Garmin InReach. This is an emergency SOS button. So it's an additional cost. Again, you do not need this, but it is for peace of mind for your loved ones at home. There's also, this also will track you if you're doing any kind of the fun rides on track leaders, like if you follow Tour Divide, but it has a little SOS button. So if something goes terribly, terribly wrong, they will airlift you out of there. And the most important thing I would say is extra battery and cables for your phone. This is like the one thing that I tell everybody that they need to do the first time is if you're using your phone for music or directions, bring an extra battery. Okay, what's the time check at? Oh, we're good. Okay. And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat or the Q&A. We'll go over it afterwards. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Nutrition on the bike. A, B, C, always beat carbon. The important thing on a lot of these rides, and I definitely did this when I first started out, is that a lot of people undereat. When you're doing an active ride that is long distance, you can burn, some people say up to 90 grams of carbohydrates an hour. So you could actually burn a lot. And even if you're starting and you're used to a shorter ride, a 2-hour ride is very different than a 3-hour ride. Your gas tank will empty. So always have enough snacks. Always carry enough water. I think it's really, this year has, or last year has demonstrated that definitely be more self-sufficient. So you don't need to stop as much, but also don't carry 8 liters of water with you if you don't really need it because it's quite heavy. So have some water. I also, my baggie of Scratch hydration mix is empty, but I have a big bag of, you could do Scratch or Gatorade or Marten if you want. You can have pre-purchased things. I like to reuse plastic. So I have little white baggies of white powder that I carry with me on rides and fill up my water bottle with them. I also have Scratch or Clip Blocks in there that I use to chew on. Sometimes you prefer to chew versus drink. So it's important to understand, like if it's too hot, maybe you don't want to chew. If it's cold or you're bored, you might want to chew it. And I always carry whatever kind of treats I find at the latest stop with me in there. This is still coming out of this bag. But the important thing is making sure that you know what works for your tummy. Everybody's very different. Everybody will respond very differently. If you know you prefer sweet or salty, lean into that. And try out different things, even if it's like a 30-minute ride. Try like unwrapping and like opening this and eating it while you're on the bike, just so you feel more comfortable with it on a bigger ride. So with Randonneuring events, we usually have off-bike stops, such as a control, and it might be a cafe. At that point, that's usually when I go for a little more protein. So I have it kind of ranked in my head after things I've tried. For me, I really like a kick of coffee and a cheese bun, because cheese buns are delicious. But if I go too fatty, I know that that's going to upset my stomach. So things that I would avoid are like a milkshake or a hamburger. I'm not vegetarian in the day-to-day, but I find eating vegetarian works for my tummy while I'm on rides. Cool. Finally, night riding. Solid front and rear lights. These are absolutely required. They have to be solidly attached to your bike. A lot of folks have fancy wheels with dynamo hubs that generate them, which is really nice. I have that, so I don't have to worry about it, but you can also buy an attached light if you want. This works just fine. Again, if you're Canadian, I got it from Mountain Equipment Co-op. From there, you're also required to have a reflective vest. I've seen people make these with reflective duct tape. You can get construction vests. This is a little running vest that I got that rolls up, and I can keep little ankle straps on there. So I have these on my ankles, which I think gives a little movement when it's dark, so folks can see you. It also tends to get colder at night. So I carry arm warmers and a raincoat. A raincoat with me to layer up. There goes the bag. It's fine. And sometimes night riding by yourself can be kind of psychologically challenging. So I use podcasts to help me through that, because it helps me kind of like listen to a story or an audiobook or something like that. Yeah, so the TLDR is like, really don't be afraid of night riding. As a woman, I joined Randonneurs Ontario and I was like terrified of night riding. And in my experience, I've found it really, really nice and relaxing. That also, as a caveat, I think as a woman, I get shouted at less on bike rides. But also knowing that like it's whoever you are and whoever your body is, whatever your body is moving through that space is going to be unique to you. But it can be really nice and quiet and really, really, truly beautiful. If you're worried about night riding, start as a group, reach out to your ride organizer, or join the Flèche, which we'll talk about later, which is a group night ride. Phew. Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you so much, everyone. That was my presentation. If you have more questions, do the Q&A and we will try to answer them all afterwards. But you can see here, this is the hot mess that I have in my bag. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Erin. The next presentation is on categories of rides: Populaires, Permanents, Brevets, Super Randonneur. It will be presented by Tim Ormond. Tim is an experienced randonneur who is often found at the head of the course or doing permanents, which he will talk about. He is the 2014 recipient of the Jim Griffin Rookie of the Year Award. He sits on the board of Randonneurs Ontario, where he is the director of social media. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Marty. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to our symposium. All right, first slide, please. Erin, can you cue in the next slide, please? Thank you.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries. And the next slide, please. So just to briefly summarize what I'm going to be talking about, there are three types of main randonneuring events: the Populaires, the Brevets, and the Permanents. So I'll go through these one by one. Just a quick note here that in order to participate in any of these events, you need to be a member of Randonneurs Ontario. Next slide, please. So Populaires are rides that the club organizes that are less than 200 kilometers. They have no time limit, unlike most events in randonneuring, nor do they have any controls. Their purpose tends to be, they tend to be held early in the season, so often the club uses them to help members train to get ready for the longer rides. But you can also see them as a great way to get to know people in the club. That was certainly in my first year in the club. I rode many Populaires at the beginning of the season, and that really helped me kind of find my way around the club and get better prepared for the brevets later in the season. It's also a good opportunity to test gear and things like that. You can test your lighting situation without having to actually ride at night, you know, and you can get an idea of what it's going to be like. So those are Populaires. Next slide, please. And then I've just given 2 examples of Populaires. So the first one, starting in Oakville, it's 80 kilometers long. That's one that we run out of the Toronto chapter. And then the other one out of Windsor, 70 kilometers long. That's one that we run out of our Huron chapter. At the end of my talk, I'll link to our archive of routes in the chat, so you'll have reference to those, but I'll do that when I'm done. Next slide, please. So next, we'll talk about brevets, and brevets are really sort of the main event of randonneuring, and usually there are 4 main events: the 200, the 300, the 400, and the 600. There are brevets that are longer, though they're not held as frequently, right? So there are 1,000 kilometer brevets, and every 4 years, our club also holds a 1,200 kilometer brevet, the Granite Anvil. When you do a brevet, the distances are subject to controls and time limits. And I've given the time limits up there based on the distances, right? So a 200 kilometer ride, you must finish it before 13 and a half hours. 300K before 20 hours, 400K before 27 hours, and so on and so forth, right? So it's not a race by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a time limit on it. And you know, the time limit there, it adds an element of challenge to it. It also, well, it helps you keep track of the time, really. These are long rides, right? So next slide, please. So what distinguishes brevets from Populaires is that these are official events in the calendar, and often they are used in order to qualify for other events. So for example, if you want to ride the Paris-Brest-Paris, you have to do a series of brevets in order to get that qualification. Brevets are in the schedule. They are not, you know, once we've decided the schedule for the season, that schedule is usually not negotiable. If you've completed a brevet, you can purchase a medal in order to commemorate your accomplishment. And I've got a photograph of one of the medals up there for you to see. And then if you complete one of each category of the 4 brevets, 2, 3, 4, and 600, if you complete one of each in one season, then the club will provide you with a medal. And that's what the medal is there, that I've got the picture of there. Next slide, please. And here are 2 examples of brevets. So we have one out of the Ottawa chapter here, the Kingston 600. And then another one from the Toronto chapter, one of our most popular brevets, the Lakes and Vines 300. Very beautiful ride going through the wine region of Southern Ontario. Again, I'll provide a link to our archive when I'm done. Next slide, please. And here's an example of the control card that you would use during your completion of a brevet. If you've never done a brevet before, then the way this works is you get someone at the control to mark the time and initial your time. There's an open time and a closing time for each control. I've never arrived at a control before it opens, although I suppose it's possible. But you do want to get to the controls before they close. All right, next slide, please. Now, the final category of event are called permanents. And essentially a permanent is any brevet or populaire route. If you're doing a brevet route, the same time limits apply and the same controls apply. Although there is a certain degree of flexibility with controls, you can start at a different control than at the designated start and finish, for example. One reason why I like permanence is because it allows you to set your own schedule. I have children and I also have an aging parent, so I'm at a point in my life where I can't necessarily follow the brevet schedule the way I might like to. So being able to do permanence enables me to still participate in the club. One of the drawbacks to that is that permanents do not necessarily qualify you for other events. So for example, you can't use permanence in order to qualify for Paris-Brest-Paris. But if you have no intention of doing PBP, or if it's not a PBP year and you're not, if you just want to go for rides, then permanents are a great opportunity. In order to do a permanent, you still have to get permission from the club. Next slide, please. So just to briefly summarize, the three types of rides again are the Populaires, the Brevets, and the permanents. And yeah, I'll now link to those. I'll put those in the chat for everyone to see. And thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, Tim. The next presentation is on a particular class of events, including Devil's Week and a unique series of brevets known as the Entertainment Series, which was created by our next presenter, Carrie Chappelle. Chappie is a veteran randonneur who's been a long-standing member of Randonneurs Ontario's board, where he currently serves as the vice president of the Huron chapter. He is well known for his love of leisurely lunch stops and holds the club record for completing 5 Paris-Brest-Paris, which he did consecutively between 2003 and 2019. Take it away. Carrie, are you on mute?
That's better. Off mute.
Okay.
I'll talk about Devil's Week. Devil's Week is Ontario Randonneurs. One chapter will host Devil's Week every year, and you'll run a 200 on a Saturday, 300 Sunday, Monday off. And then you'll do a 400 on Tuesday, then Wednesday off. Then you do a 600 on Thursday, Friday. So I'm going to talk about the Ottawa chapters, Devil's Week. It's just going through your pictures right now. And this is a Chenot 200, the last picture of the 5-arch stone bridge. Okay, Aaron, you can switch pictures. That moves to the 300, the glorious scenery, that actually 300 in Ottawa. Glorious scenery during the ride, crossing the bridge over the Centennial Lake, part of the Madawaska River. See the Randonneur ahead. That's a better shot of that. There's a nice farmland on the 300. And the 400, Athens 400, this is along the 8th Maberly Road, an old church. And a pile of these little log cabins everywhere on that Athens 400. The Westport Road and the shores of Wolf Lake. And then this is amazing rainbow near Lyndhurst at the sunset of the 400. This is a bridge that had been closed, and they had a floating bridge available for the cyclists and the locals to cross, which we were lucky to do that, stay on route. It's an old sawmill in Balaclava, pretty much a ghost town there. And then a little dam in Clayton just after the control. And now I'm going to talk about International Devil's Week. One year the Huron chapter hosted an event with Detroit Randonneurs, and we did a 200 and 300 in Windsor, out of Windsor. Then we went across the border to Detroit, and we had a 400 in Detroit and a 600 that started in Port Huron. It's the first time this has been done. Now these cycling jerseys were here on chapter put these together. The Devil's Week jersey, you get the American on one side, Canadian on the other, and of course we got the Go to Hell hat. Now it's not an insult, but because there is a Hell, Michigan, and that was a control in the 600. A picture of 4 Ontario Randonneurs at in Hell, Michigan at the saloon, had their card signed. Picture of the jersey being worn during the ride, a couple of them. It's a good picture of that jersey being worn at a Cobble Beach Resort on the Big Bay 200 by Tim O'Callaghan, and then again in Paris, France in 2015 or 19. That also we also offered a Devil's Week medallion for a medal for people that finished 1 brevet of the 4 during the series, which was kind of neat. And that leads us to here on Chapter's Entertainment Series. What we decided to do is you get a lot of time to do these rides if you stay together and pedal quickly. So on the 200, we'd stop and attend a play in Stratford. One of the first was this, the musical, Elliot, but can't read it, something about the Elliot, the musical. This is a picture in Stratford. You see a couple of the cyclists wearing the tuxedo jerseys. And we made it in time to have a nice little brunch in downtown Stratford before we went to the play. And then at the play, they have a little break where you can stand outside. And there's a couple from the Netherlands. You'll see them in the next picture. They wanted to take pictures of us and his wife. So he ends up telling her there's only 2 minutes left, but he had to give her a kick in the butt to get her to listen. Once we got inside, these tuxedo jerseys that the cyclists wore were quite popular. A lot of pictures were taken. Then we ran into this young fellow that had done 200s before with us. Then he had children and they didn't think his bike was cool. So they let him ride with him if he had this unicycle. Well, he came out and did a 200 with us on the unicycle. This is Jacob Nair. Unfortunately, he didn't make it in the 13.5 hours, but we had a lot of fun seeing him. And after we went to the play in Stratford, we pedaled and get back on our bikes and we caught up to him. And this is where we're saying hello to him and of course, goodbye. It was good seeing him again. Erio and Windsor, of course, we have to add to the entertainment. So on this event, we have an 18-hole mini putt championship. And that was quite a hoot. As John Cumming, he was close right to the end. I thought he was going to win. This is where if you had to hook the ball, you'd land in this little pond and you'd lose a couple strokes to replace your ball. Charles, a fellow cyclist, Charles, he thought the highest score won. We let him know, no, it's the lowest score, Charles, just like golf. He wasn't too happy. Now this gentleman, if he had to putt, he would have lost. So he blew it in, figuring he'd count tie for the lead. And we had a discussion afterward, and we said, no, Brenda's the one that won, so let's give her credit for it. That's Brenda Weichers right there. Back on the bikes, back on route. And we get to the next control, and Charles finds the pencil he had used at the mini putt championship. Forgot it was behind his ear. Found it at the control. Couldn't believe he didn't notice it with his helmet. And this is just a ride into the finish in Windsor on the 300. And that leads us to the Creemore Classic 400. A good friend of ours, Liz Overdoing, made this award for the bowling championship. So on the 400, 220K into the ride, we stop at a bowling alley and a 5-pin bowling alley and have a play around bowling. The Windsorite showed up at my place the year they come up for the ride. And we started at 6 in the morning. So this is about, started at 5 in the morning. It's about 6 o'clock in Sawville Beach, 30K into the ride. It was wet, bit of a tailwind, which is good. Tailwind pushed us for the first 100K into Owen Sound. We went by the marina. There's a bunch of cyclists that we stopped at the Frog and had a nice little lunch before getting on the bikes and heading to the Eugenia Control. Now the Eugenia Control is about 7.5K climb to get to this little place here. So we all stopped and had our card signed, had something to eat, and got back on the bikes. Now Brenda and Tim knew they had to get some money for what was coming next. This is where he went into the bowling championship at the outside in Collingwood, the bowling alley. Matt McFarlane, he wanted to look cool, so he wore his glasses. He didn't win, but he looked good. Brenda, she thought she could pitch the ball instead of bowl, using the fastball. Darcy Haggerty, he was close to winning. He was one shot. He had to get all the pins on this next bowl, but he didn't. I was out. I couldn't win. I was previous championship, so I did a little juggling act for the fellow Randonneurs. The winner was Richard Malash. We all got our picture taken, and it was Richard's job to take the group to Creemore for a nice little dinner. That's him leading the group out of the bowling alley. There we are in Creemore, having a nice brunch or supper, I guess you could say, getting ready to head to the finish. Just 100K to go after the Creemore. We usually stop in the village at Blue Mountain, but it was closed. So we just continued on to the open 24 hours, and it was closed. Picture you see here is ultraviolet green lights. Instead of having a little nap, you can put that thing on for 10 minutes and you'd feel a lot better. We haven't used that since. The riders all got together for the last 50K of the Brevet, and we headed to the finish. The next day, we like to do some kayaking from Paisley to Saugeen Shores. Some fellow Randonneurs, his wife, were on a tandem kayak. Things didn't go well for them. Bob McLeod and his wife. And the next event we host was go-kart championship. We only had 4 riders participating in that, and Matt McFarland was at the start, all pumped up. And you can't take pictures during the finish, so this was at the finish. I pulled in and just won, barely won. Then we continued on route. And at midnight, we met a fellow cyclist that when his wife went to bed at 9:45, he thought he'd jump on his new bike and meet us on the ride. Well, he did. There's Terry Payne. We made it to the finish in the morning. Everybody's all smiles. Loaded up our vehicles and headed home. So that's the end of the entertainment series. If you have any questions, feel free to add them at the end of the discussions. Hope to see you up here in Saugeen Shores.
Thanks, Kerry. That was great. What a unique set of brevets that is. Wow. The next presentation is on an event unique to Randonneuring, the Flèche. Bob McLeod, longtime Randonneurs Ontario member and Flèche team captain, will be presenting. Bob was the former president of Randonneurs Ontario and currently holds the board position of Toronto chapter member at large. Take it away, Bob.
Thanks, Marty. So I want to give you a brief overview of the Flèche Velocio, which roughly translate to rapid arrow in English. And this is one of my favorite ride formats, mostly because it's a sprint ride, it's a team ride, get to do it together. It's very social. You plan the route together and you ride it together. So it's a great way to kind of break into the season. If we could move to the next slide, Aaron. Thank you. So the Flèche event is effectively, it's a team event of at least 360 kilometers. And the advantage of this, of course, it's a team event, so we get to do this together. One of the real benefits of this ride, I think, is for those long distance riders who are looking to break into the longer formats. So if you've done 200s and you're thinking, oh, could I do a 400? This is a great event to join early in the year with a team. So it's like a nice, safe environment where you're going to get lots of support, you're going to get lots of coaching, and you can kind of help yourself kind of get used to the idea of doing 400 kilometers. So anyway, a great format. If we could go to the next slide. So this is 3 a.m. at Casino Rama. This is our Hogtown Express team in 2018. Somebody on our team discovered, to our delight, that Casino Rama has a noodle bar that's open all night. And unlike Kerry's team, who was kind of like struggling through the hinterland of Huron, we were enjoying ourselves at 3 o'clock in the morning at Casino Rama having our noodle dinner. So anyway, great event, and this is the team that participated. So Flèche format. It's basically an event that occurs at clubs around the world. It started in France and it has spread around the world since then. In France and in milder climates, it's usually held around on Easter weekend, but in colder locales, it's later. So BC, if you look at their calendar, they basically run their Flèche the first week of May. Quebec, club, they run theirs in the second week of May, and typically in Ontario, we run ours the third week of May. It's kind of ironic to me that Ontario would run it third week of May, and Quebecers are tough because they run it the second week of May. And I would say almost every Flèche I've done third week of May, the temperature in the middle of the night gets down to about 2-3 degrees, pretty typically. So anyway, good we're doing it near the end of May instead of the end of April. The teams are basically composed of anywhere from 3 to 5 machines. And those can be any kind of bike. So it can be a single bike, a tandem bike, a velomobile, whatever it is you want to ride. But there can be anywhere from 3 to 5 of them. So conceivably, if you had 5 tandems, you could have 10 people doing a Flèche event. At least 3 of the bikes have to complete the full distance, and the team basically rides together. So you don't do this as individual rides, kind of arriving at a common destination. You ride together as a team. You can assist each other, but you're not permitted to assist other teams. We can move to the next slide. Oh, I think we missed one slide there. I think up maybe one. Yeah, there we are. So this is basically the format is the club. So Ontario would pick a common destination for the year. So you might pick, we picked Collingwood a couple of years ago. So basically the teams design their own route to the destination. They're self-organizing teams, and you design your own route. The only real rule here is that no road can be ridden twice in the same direction. So you can't do a circle and keep looping. And the distance must be a minimum of 360 kilometers. The ride duration is 24 hours, pretty well exactly. And you start anytime between 6 p.m. on the Friday to 10 a.m. on the Saturday morning. And normally in Ontario, my experience is that the Flèche teams synchronize their start time so that we all arrive at the same time and we can celebrate together. We usually, arrive in the evening in time to have a great dinner together. There's a 22nd hour checkpoint, which has to be at least 25 kilometers from the end, and no rest stop can exceed 2 hours. So that kind of sets the parameters. We could go to the next slide. So this just gives you an idea very briefly of how the route is laid out. This is the route plan that the Hogtown Express used in 2017. As you can see at the bottom, there's a common destination that all of the Flèche teams all arrive there about the same time, but the route they take to get there is up to them. So this just sort of highlights some of the key things that I just talked about in terms of the Flèche rules. We can move on to the next slide. This is the Hogtown Express team, 7 a.m. in Coldwater in 2018. And as you can see, we had 6 riders on this team, including 1 tandem bike. And this is us at the destination in Collingwood, just as we're loading up to head home. Kind of a happy crew. So this was a fabulous team. We rode together for a couple of years in a row. And then the next slide. And then just to wrap up, here's an idea of some of the common destinations that we have had over the last few years. Kind of gives you an idea of where we're going. I think we're going to have to pick something in the west of the province sometime soon, so we have to ride into the wind to get there. But anyway, this gives you an idea of the types of destinations that we've been picking. Generally, they're places where you can get accommodation when you arrive, and where there's going to be good meals and an enjoyable destination at the end of your ride. So that's the Flèche, a fabulous way to break into long distance riding. Marty, over to you.
Thanks, Bob. I think Peter mentioned that at the beginning, but Randonneurs Ontario were the first club outside of France to do a Flèche. This was back in 1985, and all the clubs do them now all over the world. So good on Ontario, anyways. The next talk is about Grand Brevets and the Granite Anvil, Randonneur Ontario's own 1,200-kilometer quadrennial event. It is fitting that the presentation will be given by Dave Thompson, who holds the world record for competing the most 1,200 plus Grand Brevets in 1 year with 11, and who has completed 43 1,200 plus Grand Brevets. When he isn't doing Grand Brevets, Dave is extremely busy as the president of Randonneurs USA and as Randonneur Ontario treasurer and VP for Simcoe Muskoka. Go ahead, Dave.
Thanks, Marty. Well, that's quite the intro. I'm here to talk about the Grand Randonnées, and these are the 1,200 kilometer and up rides. And this is what I'm in Randonneuring for. This is what I really enjoy. The 1,200 and up are governed by Randonneurs Mondiaux, which is the organization that takes care of these rides. So Randonneurs Ontario would sanction the completion of the riders in the Granite Anvil and then send those to Randonneurs Mondiaux for homologation. The only one that falls outside of that is Paris-Brest-Paris, which is homologated by the Audax Club Parisien. Originally, there were only two major 1,200 Ks being ridden. They were PBP and Boston, Montreal, Boston. Now they're everywhere. Formats are all over the map. Most of them are return to the start. That's certainly a lot easier for the riders, but there are some in Europe and have been in the US that are point to point. And lately there are some that are run as a clover. So you'd start off in a location and then loop back to that location for every night. That's really convenient for the riders, and it's really convenient for the organizers because there's no schlepping bags. You're coming back to the same location all the time. It just makes it easier all around. The distances start at 1,200, but there's no ceiling on that. So for instance, there's transcontinental rides in Australia that are 4,000 plus kilometers. And those are totally unsupported. There are some that are intermediate. So for instance, I did one in Thailand that was just over 2,000 kilometers, and that was a really nice distance. The minimum speed for these varies by the distance. So for that ride in Thailand with 2,000 kilometers, the minimum speed was only 10 kilometers an hour. So literally, I only had to ride 240 kilometers a day. It really meant for a leisurely ride, it was almost like touring. There can also be, for rides that have excessive climbing, there can be allowances, time allowances for that additional climbing. The 1,200 Ks are a challenge, but they're fun. There's a real feeling of accomplishment in getting one done. And there's enough time in there if you plan it properly and you're in shape for it to really enjoy yourself. So I'm out there for the fun. I'm not trying to get it done in the minimum amount of time possible. If I am in a great spot, can stop for a cappuccino, I'm there. And if you think about the time limits, even though, in general, we end up being pressed for time, if you organize it properly and you think about 90 hours to do 1,200 K, you could literally have 30 hours of stop time in there and 60 hours to do 1,200 K, i.e. 20 kilometers an hour. So it's not as if you really have to be fast. You just have to be organized. So you could think of 30 hours of stop time being 3 night stops of 5 hours or more, and then the rest being split among various controls to stop, bio breaks, get food, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to be organized to get through the ride. Next slide. So as I was saying, They're everywhere now. If you look on the Randonneurs Mondiaux calendar, so go and look online to Les Randonneurs Mondiaux, and you'll see the schedule worldwide. This year, for the first year, there's a ride scheduled in South Africa out of Johannesburg. Remains to be seen whether it'll take place in the middle of the pandemic, but that's the first one in Africa. So every continent now but Antarctica has, and I don't think we'll be getting to Antarctica very quickly. The rewards are amazing on these things. You know, I've been to places that I never would have gotten to, or not in that format, had I just been traveling and touring. It's so fascinating to get out of your comfort zone where you live and see the flora, the fauna, and the people, the food, the languages. It's just so much fun. The support ranges from 0, and I mean 0, to full support. So I'll talk about the Granite Anvil a little later because that's a fully supported ride. But I've done some where literally you pay 10 euros for your Brevet card and see you at the end. That's it. You have to work it all out yourself, figure out where you think you're going to stop, book some hotel rooms if you're going to stop at hotel rooms, or sleep at the side of the road if you're comfortable doing that. So those, it takes a lot of personal planning and know how you are at riding these rides to be able to manage your time. Next slide. Sometimes you get off course. There's Hamid Akbarian in the background. So there was a little jog in the route that we weren't really sure about, and we found that we were going off course, and there was this little road that was supposed to join up back to the main route. So we started heading down it, and the grass got taller and taller and taller, and we got to where it joined with the main road, and unfortunately there's a 12-foot fence. So we had to track our way back through that, getting thorns in our tires. So there are some challenges on these rides as well, especially when they're in areas where there haven't been pre-rides. There's not a lot of support. You have to find your own way around. Next slide. And I was talking about amazing things to see. So here's in Thailand. This is the ride that was 2,000 kilometers and relatively flat. Wonderful people. Obviously, I couldn't read the street signs, but food was everywhere. There was a 7-Eleven, 24-hour 7-Eleven every 20 miles. So there was no lack of food, no lack of places to stop and spend the night. All you had to do was look for a street sign that said 24, and that meant it was a hotel. And so here's this guy on a motorcycle with a little bit of luggage. I don't take very many pictures, but I couldn't resist that one. Next slide. There we go. So this was still on the Thailand ride. Here's the Mekong River. Most of the accommodation on the ride that was provided by the ride itself was fairly limited, but this was like a 4-star hotel, and the hotel itself was floating, and wonderful restaurant. That was a day that I got in there at 4:30 p.m. and thought, okay, I'm going to get some good sleep. And then I woke up in the middle of the night and headed out. But you never know what to expect on some of these rides. Next slide. And here's at the top of some mountains. The scenery on some of these rides is just amazing. Here we are at the top of one of the passes, and it's quite a wonderful experience to be heading down to the top of the ski hills. So you can see there, Val d'Isère is downhill from here, and that's the top of Val d'Isère. Next slide. And here's one of the famous climbs on the Giro, the Stelvio. 2,760 meters above sea level. You count the switchbacks just an amazing experience. And the finish was at the top because most people were finishing in the dark and they didn't want people racing down the mountain to the finish. So they clocked you at the top and then you could camp out. I had a ride waiting for me. It was just an amazing experience. Next slide, please. So here's my bicycle. You saw Aaron's. This is how I'm set up most of the time. I've got that under top tube bag that carries spares and personal stuff. I've got my pockets stuffed with food. The back pouch is all my clothing, rain gear. You never know what you're going to run into overnight. And I tried the front bag. I just didn't find that was good for me. So I've settled on this as my setup. The frame comes from Hugh Black in Ontario. I've got a custom titanium fork and everything else is pretty much custom to my particular measurements. And it's heavy. I've given up on trying to be a weight weenie. I just carry a ton of stuff. I even have a bar end shifter if I need to stick it on there, because on the Rocky Mountain 1200, a shifter broke for the last 200 kilometers. So I carry everything. Next slide. The riding experience varies quite a bit. North America, it's probably in a fairly narrow band. Most of the rides are focusing on overnights at motels now, not all. South America, I just did the one ride there out of Brazil, and it was the inaugural ride in Brazil. So we worked with the organizers to kind of figure out where the overnights would be and pick spots. Europe, it's everything, from fully supported to, as I was saying, the €10 and good luck ride. But again, with the scenery and the language and the food, just wonderful. Australia, done a couple rides there. Wonderful people, broad, wide roads, not turny and twisty like Europe. Asia, Carrie's done this one in Israel. Geography is amazing. We get so used to in Ontario seeing lakes and streams. When you get to Israel, you see the rock. It's desert. You see all the underlying geography. Africa, haven't been there yet. Next slide. The next Granite Anvil is planned for 2022. It would have been 2021, but we decided that that was too risky. The courses so far have started in Oshawa and looped around towards Ottawa and back to Oshawa. In 2022, our plan is to start in the Ottawa area, and this one's going to be shaped more like a lollipop. Start in Ottawa, go to Bancroft, and then 3 loops in Bancroft, and then back to Ottawa. So makes it a little easier for the riders, a little easier for the organizers, and wonderful scenery and good terrain. It's fully supported, so we'll be carrying bags. We provide food. You can talk to anybody who's been on the Granite Anvil rides, and they'll tell you how much they've enjoyed it. But they're challenging. The Granite Anvil rides are really challenging. I didn't realize how hilly Ontario was until I started riding my bicycle. Next slide. No matter how many 1200s you do, when you start talking to somebody about randonneuring, they say, well, have you done PVP? Because that's the gold standard. I started kind of midstream between 2 PVP years, and I'd already done a couple of 1200s. And I wasn't keen on it at first, thinking, do I want to ride with thousands of people? But my wife Sandy said, you really have to do it because it's what randonneurs do. So I did it. And it's a spectacle. Jung-Ah is going to cover that in a minute, so I'll pass it on to her.
Thanks, Dave. That was great. Our final presentation of the evening is on PBP, which will be presented by Jung-Ah Hong. Jung-Ah arrived in Canada in 2019 from Korea and joined the Ottawa chapter of Randonneurs Ontario, where she completed a Brevets series qualifying her for Paris-Brest-Paris, which she successfully completed. She is the recipient of Randonneurs Ontario Jim Griffin Rookie of the Year Award. Take it away, Young Ah.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. This presentation is about my experience at PBP 2019. When I signed up for PBP, I only had 1 year of randonneuring experience. So my ride was neither efficient nor pretty, but it's more genuine and wild without hotels or dropbacks. So I hope you enjoy. Next, please. Paris-Brest-Paris is a 1,200-kilometer bike ride started in 1891. To participate, you need to complete full series of brevets first. There are 3 categories with different time limits and different start time. 80-hour and 90-hour groups start in the evening, and 84-hour groups start the next morning. There were over 6,000 participants in 2019, which is amazing. Next. Ottawa Randonneurs stayed in a hotel in Maurepas. First thing we did after checking in was to put our bikes together. We were given the whole recreation room for our bikes, which was empty when we got there, but after a couple of days, there was barely any space left. Next. Then we did some exploration. We rode to the start, which was a sheep farm in Rambouillet. The day before the start, we got our bikes checked in the pouring rain. All Canadian randonneurs had a little gathering and we took a nice group photo. Next. And the day has come. There were thousands of randonneurs from all over the world. I was in J group, which started at 6:15 and had 90-hour time limit. Next. Pace was pretty fast from the start, partly because of the fresh legs and the excitement. Peter Grant and I were riding together, and we often found ourselves trapped in pelotons with hundreds of people. As the night set in, the sight ahead became just breathtaking. My night rides have been always lonely and scary, but the endless line of red taillights really lightened me up. Next. Shortly after we left Mortain, I wanted to sleep. This was not the plan, but it was what I was worried about, as I've never ridden through the night without sleeping. Poor Peter waited while I was sleeping on the roadside. By the time we got to the first control, Dick Felton caught up with us. I told Dick that I was having trouble with the cold, and he kindly let me take his extra layer. Next. After the sun came up, I started feeling much better. Lots of locals set up little food stands for us in front of their houses. Everything went pretty well until we got to Ludiac. Next. At this point, my legs had enough distance for the day and another night was setting in. Peter warned me about how everyone will try to sleep at Ludiac and strongly suggested that we sleep anywhere but Ludiac. He was absolutely right. As I pulled into the control, thousands of bikes came into my sight. The auditorium was already full, and there was a long lineup of people trying to get a bed. The view was so discouraging that it helped us get back on the road quickly. Next. It was only 43 kilometers to the next stop at St. Nicholas. I thought, well, that's less than 2 hours. It should be easy. I never knew not only I could sleep on the bike, but I can also pedal and balance my bike while asleep. Even though I was quite fascinated, I had to get my shit together quickly because when I woke up, I was going downhill at like 60 kilometers per hour. Thankfully, I made it to St. Nicholas without crashing, and Peter and I got a bed next to each other. We were taken to a large auditorium full of camp cots where hundreds of people were already sleeping. I went to shower and was very surprised to find a thundering noise when I got back, which was coming from the person right next to me, Peter. Gosh, I had no idea he was such a loud snorer. I couldn't sleep through that noise. And on top of that, it was so cold in there. I spent the next 4 hours curled up in a ball without getting any sleep. I was so grumpy after the rough night. When we got to Carhay, Peter suggested me to sleep there for an hour. The whole space was already at capacity, full of tired bodies. On the floor, on the tables, under the tables, just everywhere. I found one tiny spot on the floor and quickly joined other randonneurs sleeping on cardboard boxes. But I felt a bit chilly, so I pulled a couple more cardboard boxes and made myself into a cardboard box sandwich. But I was about to think this is ridiculous, then I fell asleep. Peter somehow located me under the cardboard boxes, and that's when I realized that I was sleeping in front of the washroom door. That was why people were stepping on me, and that was why nobody was sleeping there. Next. The world started looking beautiful again after the sleep. Once we got to Brest, I could see a beautiful coastline from the bridge. Now, all I needed to do was to ride back to where I started. Next. After Brest, I discovered another element which made the whole experience a lot more enjoyable. There were people sleeping everywhere in various ways. It was like watching a free performance art. Next. On the way to Carhay, Peter started not feeling well and wanted to bail. I felt really bad for him. Then I realized I can sleep at every single control from then on. So at Ludiac, I parked my bike, slept, then went back to where I parked my bike, only to find out that my bike was not there. I checked nearby aisles, but still couldn't find my bike. There were thousands of bikes parked all over the place. I started checking every single bike. I was so frustrated. I ended up spending almost an hour looking for my bike. I could have used that time to sleep more. Next. At Tintaniac, there were locals cheering the cyclists. In contrast to the cheerful crowd outside, as soon as I stepped into a cafeteria, sleeping randonneurs were all over the place. It was 9 in the morning, but it didn't matter. I got to bed again. A little boy waved at me to follow him. He took me to the stairway and went up to the second floor and then to the third floor. So I stopped, looked at him, and told him, dude, how far are we going? Well, he didn't speak English and I didn't speak French. So we failed to communicate and he continued going upstairs. He took me to the top floor of the building. I was so mad. At this point, I had 1,000 kilometers on my legs already. Next. At Villain, I got to bed again. After a couple hours sleep on disintegrating gym mat, I figured I better try to ride through the night like a 200-kilometer brevet. I should be able to do that after sleeping this much during the day. And I arrived at Mortain around 2 a.m. I felt great. It was only another 120 kilometers. I should be done by tomorrow morning, I thought. It's a mystery how I never learn a lesson and keep making same mistakes. A couple hours after I left Mortain, I started falling asleep on my bike again. And I finally gave up and admitted that my body needed a power nap. I threw my bike in a ditch and lay down. It was freezing cold, so I emptied my bag on my body to just bury myself under my stuff. When I opened my eyes, it was bright everywhere. I was so confused for a couple seconds. Then I went like crap. I didn't set my alarm, and of course, there was nobody to wake me up. I threw all my stuff in the bag and raced to Drew as I only had 1 hour left until closing. Next. I was desperately searching for somebody who could pull me, but everyone was so tired that everyone was just riding crooked. I hit to race, but I made it to Drew on time. Then sun came up, shining the field, and from here, everyone looked happy and relieved. Next. Then this was it. After 88 hours, I made it to where I started. Next. So that's it from me. I hope you all enjoyed my experience at PVP. Thank you.
Thanks, Janga. That was a great travel log. And I just forgot how many people are there. It's crazy, but that was really a good, interesting perspective on it. Thank you. So we're gonna, I think before we start the questions, we're gonna take a 5-minute break so everybody can use the washroom or grab a glass of water, and we'll be back at 8:20. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks.
And just while everyone is stretching, just a reminder that we are answering questions in the Q&A option. If you have questions that you've posted in the chat, we might miss them. So go down to or up, but on your Zoom toolbar, there's a Q&A. You might see some numbers on it. Post your question in there and we'll try and answer it. The questions that we've answered in the Q&A already in writing, we might bring up again. And I know that there's been a bunch of questions around the schedule this year. So we will definitely be addressing that. Also, while I have everyone's attention, thank you for your patience and understanding as we do this. As mentioned, this is the first time we've done this kind of virtual thing. So it's a learning curve for everybody, but nobody's computer has melted, I think. So far, so good.
So is Charles, I don't see it. Okay, let's start the Q&A. Charles, do you want to take over from here? I think you're on mute still. Charles, you're still on mute.
Yeah, hey, bunch of questions. I'll just start with Peter Leese answered some of the questions already that were popped up about how long Randonneuring's been going on. And the other question that was important, I think, was how do you all stop your butt from hurting? So I think that was probably one that would be nice to hear about, maybe.
Well, you go ahead.
Advil, Polysporin, riding more, bike fit. Your butt hurting is a really personal thing, and it could be a ton of different reasons, including saddle height, saddle shape, and just not kind of getting the not putting the hours in beforehand and having those tender parts kind of shocked into your butt hurting.
The saddle is, for me, it's the most important thing. And I can ride 100K on any saddle, but for anything over 100K, it has to be a Brooks B17 or some leather saddle around the same dimensions that it kills, for the first, 1,000 kilometers on that saddle. But once it forms to the shape of your rear end, it's the most comfortable thing you can ride on. And a lot of people also use chamois cream. I don't personally use it, but people use it to keep the friction from creating sores on your undercarriage.
Mine still hurts. I tried everything. Mine still hurts.
I find that early in the season, it's an issue, but as the season progresses, your body acclimatizes. I do find though that every year I have to go through that period of readjusting to it. So the first few rides, it's an issue, but then it ceases to be.
I've always found the Brooks saddles. I've always been comfortable with the Brooks saddle. And for me, it's comfortable the day I buy it. I sit on the next day, and it's like they molded it to my rear end.
Also, I think long distance cyclists, you can see we all develop our own techniques for moving around a bit, for relocating the pressure points, for kind of lifting off the saddle. I always, if I'm going downhill, I generally have a technique for lifting off the saddle a bit to release some of the pressure. And, mainly it's keeping the blood circulating. And that usually works pretty well. And I agree, early in the season, it's a bigger issue than it is later in the season once your body is adjusted.
Yes, the more that you ride, the less problem you have.
All right, there was also a bunch of questions about what we think 2021 is going to hold for us and how the season's going to go. I don't know if anybody wants to really tackle that. It's hard to say, I think, with the way things are going, to make any kind of solid predictions, but I'd say whatever the rules let us do is kind of what we're going to do, similar to last year. So I don't know, maybe wants to expand on that. Or
There was a question in some of the, I forget whether it was in the chat or the Q&As about Devil's Week. That's probably a good illustration of what we're doing. It was originally planned for late May into the beginning of June, but now we're looking at reassessing that as we get into April and early May to decide when we can run it, depending on the rules and what else is going on. So it's probably going to slip into late June or into July. So we'll play it by ear as the year goes on. And the ACP has given us flexibility to juggle the dates as necessary. So that's helpful.
And each of the ride organizers in each of the regions are going to be following our own regional guidelines around the rides that we're starting, and being really communicative. The other piece is each ride organizer is also at the discretion to go any further that they feel is safe or necessary. This is definitely a sport that comes with risks. And so each kind of choice that we make has to be an informed and calculated one that pulls in science and policy and guidelines. So join the newsletter, I guess. We'll tell you as soon as we know. But I guess to continue that, unless we have another question coming up, we do have a temporary, I should say, first pass of a schedule for this year. And based on regional restrictions and requirements, we will be following those. And following OCA guidelines.
Yeah, we have a full schedule posted on the website that's been approved by ACP, and we'll just have to adapt to whatever the conditions are as we move along. And hopefully, even in 2020, we were able to get series in, although some chapters didn't run any rides at all because of the conditions. Like the Huron chapter, Windsor was really bad, and a lot of the Huron chapter rides are out of Windsor, so they didn't take place in 2020. But Toronto got in a series, and but it was delayed and it was late in the season. But at least we got some rides in, and the number of people that could start at any one time were limited, so the starting times were flexible, and that seemed to work okay. So we'll just have to see what happens.
Okay, moving on then, there's a couple of questions kind of asking about winter training ideas and suggestions, and how to kind of step up from 100K to 200K, how to avoid injuries and doing that kind of stuff. I don't know who wants to tackle some of those questions, but
Real softballs.
yeah, some layups or whatever other sports metaphors there are. I'm not sure one's really applicable. I'm a big fan of Zwift lately because I don't have to do anything. I can do it right in my bedroom, not have to go outside and freeze. Cross training, I like skating. Skiing's great this year too. Been great snow for cross country skiing, but when I got into it, I just kind of stepped my distance up slowly, and I went from 100K to 150 to 200 and really just never stopped. So I don't know, lots of different ways to go about doing it, I guess.
Well, for me, I like being outdoors. So I spend a lot of my winter running or cross-country skiing, because I don't really like being on a trainer on a bike. I like being outside. So maybe it's not the best conditioning for cycling to be doing running in terms of muscles and whatnot, but it's just what I enjoy to do. So that's what I do.
Like Tim, I do cross-country skiing during winter. I also Zwift, but I'm not a big fan. I've tried doing a 500-kilometer once. It wasn't fun. It's doable, but it wasn't fun. I prefer being outdoors a lot more. So in winter, I am thinking about doing a Canadian ski marathon with my cross-country skis. I think it's a great cross training. Yeah, I think that's all I can say. Zwift and cross-country skiing.
Definitely the rides at the beginning of the season, the Populaires, if you start doing shorter Populaires in the end of March, that's what I do. I ride all winter, but it's, until recently it was commuting an hour or 2 hours every day. But so you maintain a base fitness doing that. But once you start doing the Populaires in the spring, you start with some 70 or 80 kilometer Populaires, and then you go to ones that are a little bit over 100 kilometers, so that by the time the first 200 is scheduled, and usually it's around the end of April, you're ready, but you're not that ready, because that 200, which we call in the Toronto chapter the gentle start, which isn't really gentle, is pretty painful. But after you do that, then you're gaining the fitness. And once I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that once you do a 300, that you've attained the basic fitness for any distance. So once you've done 300, you can do 400 and 600 and so on. But again, that's kind of hearsay training for long distance cycling. But definitely, the more you do, the less painful it is, and the better you feel after a ride.
And I will say that our schedule itself, even if we're not running those rides, there's I found this out the hard way. There's wisdom hidden in that schedule. So how we've paced out our Populaires. is surprisingly very intentional over the past 40-ish years. So if you're looking for like, oh, how should I ramp up to a 200? Look how we ramp up our Populaires series, particularly in the Toronto chapter, to the gentle start. And that's kind of a good guideline of how you should be able to complete each of these within that pace to start a 200. But I would say watch out for jumping too fast into the 1000s without having that baseline, because that's how you can injure yourself. Said from experience.
Tim, a couple questions about kind of time limits and how the time limits are determined for the randonneuring events, and then how often they're held, and kind of maybe if you want to flesh out the registration process a bit, if you can, and how we, like, someone just asked if we just show up to a ride and stuff, and it's not quite like you got to register for a ride on the site before you do that. But if somebody want to kind of walk through that a bit, that'd be helpful maybe.
Okay, well, I can answer the question about the speeds and time limits, and then maybe let Aaron or Carrie answer the question about registering for rides. But for the speed limits, it tends to be, so I've got the actual rules out here in front of me. And so it actually says for the closing for a ride between 61 and 600 kilometers is 15 kilometers an hour. But I actually think we tend to make our closings a bit slower than that, somewhere between 12 and 10 kilometers an hour. You know, the time limit is quite generous. But as I mentioned to someone in the Q&A, I mean, if the time limit is an issue, you always have the option of just doing the ride for yourself. You know, you don't have to abandon a ride unless the timing is very important to you, of course. But if you just want to go out, and at the end of the day, riding a 600 kilometer ride is an impressive feat, whether you do it in under 40 hours or in 41 hours or 42 hours. I mean, it's still something to be proud of, and not something you get to do every day. So that's basically all I have to say about the timings. But as for registration, I'll let one of the chapter VPs take that.
So Carrie, do you want to take this?
No, you go ahead, Aaron.
Okay. So you are required to register. This is one of the things I didn't show. When you register, and Tim mentioned this, you get a brevet card that's printed off with your name on it. That's done by a person who may be me. So please register on the rides beforehand. You can do it through the site, randonneursontario.ca. And when you're registering, you do need to be a member of Randonneurs Ontario and the OCA to complete a ride. Ideally, you'll have registered within 2 weeks notice. There was one question about our current registration form. Right now, the registrations for brevets aren't open yet. I'm hoping to open them this week. When you can go in and register through the form, there's going to be a handful of additional questions that we have thanks to the current global situation, that hopefully it'll be easier than last year, but it'll kind of walk you through how to register it. Once you are a member, all of our rides are free unless there is a specific supporting instance, such as what Dave mentioned with Granite Anvil, in which there is a fee for covering like hotels and like bag drops and stuff. But yeah, once you're a member, all of our rides should be free, so you can just like ride a bunch. Yeah. Did I miss anything, Carrie?
No, it sounded good, Darren.
Okay.
Let everybody sign up in advance. If the ride's on a Saturday, make sure you've signed up, and by Friday night, usually the organizer will say, I want to hear by 8 o'clock, because he's got to make control. Well, you're making your own control card up, but he's got to get ready for you in the morning. So the sooner the better.
Also, other pro tip, everything in Ziploc bags for the rain, just like everything. Like everything is in Ziploc bags. So many Ziploc bags.
A couple questions about the Flèche. Bob, if you want to tackle a couple of those there. Someone was asking what kind of happens if one or more riders can't finish the Flèche, and then how to, like, you need, what does that get for credit? Like, how does that work? And then people were curious about how the destination is chosen for the Flèche, and what's the plan for 2021's Flèche if we're doing one? And then are there any other special rules that apply to the Flèche versus normal brevets?
So maybe I'll deal with some of those questions in reverse, Charles. 2021, right now it's a bit tentative. So right now we're kind of watching how the lockdown rules evolve over the next few months, and we may end up delaying Flèche, later in the season when it can be organized. So that is yet to be determined, and the board basically is keeping an eye on it. It's pretty unlikely it'll be third week of May this year because of the way things are right now. So I guess stay tuned, and any decisions will be announced on the website. The destinations are basically chosen by the chapter VPs and the board through kind of discussion each year. We, at one of our regular board meetings very early in the year, we have a conversation about where should the destination be, and then we basically vote on it and make a decision. So usually it's determined we want an interesting destination that's easy for everyone to get to from any part of the province, and where there would be accommodations available when you get there, because generally people are staying overnight in the destination. If not all the riders can complete, the main requirement is to certify the ride as completed. At least 3 of the participating team members need to complete. So 3 machines have to complete out of the 5 potential. So this does factor into your Flèche team planning, because, for example, if you plan a Flèche and you organize a team with only 3 members in it, that's a pretty high risk strategy, because if any one of them has a mechanical breakdown or for some reason they can't complete the event, then the team does not certify as completing. But if you have 5 machines and 1 or 2 of them can't complete, then the team still gets a certified completion for the event. Did that cover the questions, Charles, on that? Did I miss anything there?
No, I think that was.
I think there was a question about the destination this year for the Flèche.
Yeah, the actual destination. I forget what we picked already.
Port
Credit.
We kind of deferred. We kind of punted until we decide when we're going to do it. But right now, tentatively, it's Oakville. That was the last conversation we had, but I don't think that was really a firm, like yeah, let's do Oakville. It was like, since we are deferring our decision on when to do the Flèche, we decided to defer on the destination as well.
And if you are interested in riding with the Flèche, the chapters set up their own teams. So contact your chapter VP. If you're interested, if you have a team in mind, contact them and let everyone know that, like, oh, hey, me and like my 14 buddies want to do 4 Flèche teams for some reason. Even early on, even if we don't have it fully scheduled out, just so that we can know that there's interest and help people get organized and paired up with mentors if they need.
Yep, and there's no limit to the number of Flèche teams we can have. So, more is the merrier kind of thing.
Oh, somebody did ask, like, how do we get home from the end of the Flèche? If we're on the go line and you live in Toronto, it would be the go line. But folks have found like the person who has the biggest car is usually the best person on the team because they drop the car off a few days beforehand, and everyone kind of piles in and straps bikes to the top of it and drives back. But people also, the team coordinates kind of returning home.
And that was also the idea of port credit because it's on the go line. So
Yes,
everybody
exactly.
can, you know, take public transportation if they want to and from the Flèche, or home from the Flèche anyways.
Not
The
from
Carry
Ottawa.
camp. Yeah.
Yeah, usually though, that's part of the team planning is how do we, you know, pre-position a vehicle at the destination so that we can all pile in and get home to for everyone. So that's usually part of the team coordination. I think we got lucky a few years. We had a member who had a huge F-150 truck who had a huge bike rack on it, so we could throw, you know, 5 bikes into the truck and head home. So that was nice and convenient. But that is part of the planning process, is to figure out how to pre-position vehicles so you can get yourselves home.
Aaron, did you want to talk about the virtual Flèche?
Okay, maybe. So we are looking at posting an event, whether it is a Flèche or that other format that I can't remember. Dave would remember the actual name.
A
But
trace.
it's Trace. Thank you, Trace. Thank you. That it is a virtual version of this ride. So we're thinking of how do we adapt the fun, excitement, group rides of the Flèche or a Trace into the current world that we're in these trying times. And so we'll be posting that shortly as a kind of challenge or exciting option for folks online. But how do you want to ride for 24 hours virtually on a bike? Maybe. So do we have another question, Charles, or?
Seems like we've covered most of them. There were some questions I saw about like how, like if our brevets and other club rides operate as more of a strict group ride, and whether drafting is acceptable, and if there's a no drop policy, and kind of how to abandon a ride if you have to do that. So I don't
That's
know
a
if
good
anybody
question.
wants to tackle those specifically. I know when I've abandoned personally, which ride was it? I forget what exact ride it was. It was my first 400, but I gave up outside of Newmarket, I think, and took a taxi all the way back to my car in Erin Mills, and it cost $100. So I wouldn't recommend that approach necessarily, but CAA would probably be the best thing to get. I think they'll come
Charles,
pick
do
you
you
up.
want me to, maybe I'll field the abandon question, because I've done
Yeah,
that
sure.
times, and I can speak to it with authority, and then, you know, anybody else can pitch in if you know, with other thoughts on this. But I have a very strict hierarchy. I plan carefully, and I always consider the fact that I might have to abandon, and that could happen. You could have a mechanical issue, or you could just, you know, run out of steam, or you know, have a you know, a stomach issue or something. You never know what might happen. The weather might turn against you in a way that, you know, prevents you from finishing. So for me, it's sort of like if I'm still under steam, if I'm still moving, then I will find my way back to my vehicle or transit, however I got to the ride start. Under my own steam, on my own time. I'll take the best route back. And I do remember one in Carrie's neck of the woods. I did a 600, and I think I got to about 450, and I got an incredible cramp in my calf. There's no way I could complete the event on time. So I just plotted the best route back to Carrie's neck of the woods, and so I completed the ride, but I wasn't too worried about doing it on time. But in that case, I was still able to proceed under my own steam. so I just found the best route back. Then if you're unable to get back to your car or transit, then I have a CAA membership. It's so if you need to bail and you're in some remote location in Ontario, you get on your phone and they come and get you and they take you back to your car. And it's no extra charge. You've already paid your CAA membership. So to me, that's my safety valve, is my CAA membership. So no matter where I am, I know I can get back to my vehicle. And then if it's a particularly remote or long event, I may pre-arrange with family or friends in case I need an emergency pickup. So my brother lives in Cambridge. If I know I'm going to be in that neck of the woods, I can always pre-arrange for emergency retrieval if necessary. But the main ones I do are CAA or get back to your car, to the best route.
I
I'm
think
sure
the
other
key
people
thing,
have had other situations.
yeah, I think the key thing is that there's no sag wagon that Randonneurs Ontario is offering. So you have to consider that. It's different on like the Granite Anvil. There we've got roving vehicles and we pick up people who can't finish, bring them to the nearest overnight, and then from there they can make their way home. But the rides are not supported rides, so we don't have a vehicle out there. We have to make personal arrangements to find our way home.
I would love for Kerry to tell his stories about somebody trying to abandon a ride on his rides.
Before we go there, it's important that if you abandon a ride, please let the ride organizer know, because we really like to keep track of our people on the road, and we either like to see a brevet card that you finished or something else. We don't encourage abandonment, but if you do, please let the ride organizer know. Kerry, unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. My wife has been supportive for years. That during our rides, I've called her a day, and she's done more driving than we did we'd go out on a bike ride on 600, and she's more out in the car picking people up. And it's that's not the usual when it comes to doing brevets. You're basically on your own, but up here we try to keep two riders together at the back of the pack, not leave anybody all by themselves. And I guess I'd count on my wife if I had to.
The Huron chapter is also like you're famous for cheering people on through a ride, even when they think that they're not ready, or even when they think that they're ready to finish. Like, it's very much a really, what I've heard, I still have to come up there and ride with you. But it's a very nice group environment. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely tend to stay together. And as I was saying, my wife had made it clear after a few years, she said, if you have a brevet and somebody gets injured and they're on their own, like on a 400, there'll be no more brevets coming from here. She just says, make sure you support your friends and family, or your friends on the ride, and treat them like family, and get everybody to finish. We've had a few on the Creemore Classic. We had a gentleman that fell and broke a hip, and the rider that was with him caught up. We were waiting for the group we were just waiting to get everybody together. And we said, well, where's so-and-so? And he says, I don't know, he's behind me. I said, well, you're riding with him at the back. So you go back, or one of us, or I have to go back. So he said, I'll go back. And he found the guy on the side of the road and was able to get an ambulance, go pick him up. So up here, you won't be alone. It'll be two people at the back of the pack. It'll be me and the last person, or somebody that rides at the pace with you. Guaranteed.
And I think it's just a good practice if you're riding at night to arrange with one or more of your fellow riders to agree to ride together through the night. Just it's from a safety point of view, keep an eye on each other and encourage each other through the night. And if one of you has a mechanical issue, you've got an extra set of hands to help out.
Yeah.
So I like to, if I'm doing an overnight ride, I like to basically pair up with at least one other rider to get through the night together. Not so critical during the day, but certainly in the overnight, I feel a lot more comfortable that way.
See, I get really cranky at night and I don't want anybody talking to me. So I like riding by myself because then I can't get mad at anybody. It's just mad at myself. So it
I'll
definitely
ride with
takes,
you if you don't talk to me.
don't talk to me. I'm not interested in your conversation. Don't even like my own conversation. So it does, there's all sorts of kind of like approaches. If you do prefer to ride solo, just like make sure to be careful.
I would say, especially if you're a rookie, if you're doing a distance for the first time, then it's, I think, just to think a good practice to partner up with someone.
Yeah. And somebody did ask in the chat, if you do have a CAA membership at the lowest level, they will come and pick you and your bicycle up and drive you 200 kilometers in any direction. You can usually find one good direction that'll take you somewhere.
Yes.
But yeah, as I said before, I really like night riding. It is one of the like quietest, most beautiful moments. You can like to see the like the lights of Hamilton coming over the Ridge Road in the dark is absolutely beautiful. And you can see a lot of amazing animals. And it's nice to have that kind of quiet. It's like really, really special.
Can I, Charles, can I respond to that question about group riding a little bit?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think it's a common question for people who are thinking about randonneuring. You know, is this a group ride? Do you all stay together? You know, what do you do? So I guess the short answer is it's a group ride sometimes, but it's based on agreement among the riders. It's not necessary. Some riders, they're not interested in doing a group ride. They just want to do their own ride. They either want to like, they're going to hang back and, not feel pressured to keep up with the pack, or they want to head out ahead and they want to run at their own pace. So that is perfectly acceptable, and a lot of people do their own rides. But you also see groups agree, hey, let's stick together. So a lot of the rides I've done in the Huron chapter, that's sort of like their habit is they like to stay together in groups. So they might break up into 2 or 3 groups if it's a large event. But generally, you end up arriving at your lunch break together, and you end up having an ice cream break together or whatever. So it's a more social event, whereas maybe some of the other events you show up at, it's everybody kind of heads off and does their own ride. I would say though, and it's kind of related to the no drop, generally what we try to do is make sure if there is a newcomer to the event, so if you're at your first 200 ever and you've never ridden a 200 before, then we definitely encourage the ride organizer to make sure that a more experienced rider stays with them, or at least offers to stay with them, to help them get through that first ride. And I've had a couple of situations. One is, I offered to stick with a couple of new riders, but they were very strong and they wanted to take off. So I'm not going to hold them back. But of course, I'm coming up behind them, so I'm kind of keeping an eye on them. And what I could have discovered was they kind of raced the first 100 kilometers and they pooped out, and I caught up to them after 120 kilometers or something, and then I stayed with them to the end. And then there are other rookies that I have joined where I've just stayed with them through the whole event, and you sort of read the situation, and you kind of read the person. How confident are they? How strong are they? How much help and coaching do they really want or need? And you sort of read it as you go. But generally, we try not to drop newcomers to events. We want to make sure you have a great experience. That you finish the event and you go, wow, that was terrific. I want to do that again. We don't want folks to come out to their first ride and ride all by themselves. That's not necessarily the best way to have a great experience. So there's no formal rule about no drop, but we definitely try to make sure that we are very careful about that, especially with newcomers to the sport. And the question on drafting, whether drafting is acceptable. Drafting is totally acceptable. You can do drafting anytime you want, but you can't expect it. It's not a requirement. So it basically is an agreement between two or more cyclists that, hey, you know, we're all cycling into this tough headwind here. Let's draft, help each other out. But there's no requirement. There's no expectation. This is not a race, and so it's more a courtesy. Hey, would you mind if we drafted so that we can, you know, get through this easier? And then if the other rider says, yeah, I'd love to, then away you go. But as soon as that other person decides they're done, they're finished with the drafting, then there's no expectation that they should continue. Is that fair?
Yeah, just a word on the drafting. You know, everybody's different doing these rides. So some people, you know, enjoy riding in a group and taking advantage of the group. But my approach to this has always been, since these are really long rides, I didn't sign up to watch somebody's butt for 10 hours. I'll drag behind and ride my own speed and have to put up with the wind because I'm out there to enjoy the scenery. Yeah, it's fine sometimes to ride close with a group, but my style of riding is more riding with a couple of people close by, not necessarily, you know, one after the other, because I get bored. I get bored easily.
I can attest to that. Dave and I did a 600, just the two of us, in July, and the last 70 kilometers were harder than the previous distance we did, and we were heading into a headwind, and we just rode the whole 70 kilometers side by side. We didn't do any drafting because you know, that's the style of riding I like to do also. Just nothing in front of me, just looking at the scenery, even if it means you know, pedaling into a headwind.
Yeah. And I'd say what I'm hearing here is kind of like what I have witnessed is the majority approach, but I've also seen riders show up, you know, they're really gung-ho. There's 3 or 4 of them, they're all drafting and they're taking it very seriously, and that's their right. That, you know, it's perfectly okay to do that too.
Usually on a brevet where there's you know, 10 or more people, there's usually a fast group and they're sometimes drafting. Then there's a medium speed group, and then there's a slow group. And whatever you feel, like not everybody feels the same on every 200. So if you're feeling good, you might go, you know, with the fast group. If you're not feeling so good that day, you know, you can go with the slower group. But it usually breaks up into 3 different groups. And
and I find, you know, especially like on 200, you end up, even if you're part of the slower group or the middle group, you end up catching up with each other at the controls anyway. So, you know, you may not see the riders for 40, 50 kilometers, but at the next control, hey, they're all there kind of getting themselves organized to go, you know, to take off, and you're maybe arriving. So very often you end up sort of clumping up again at the controls before you kind of move on to the next leg of the ride.
So for smaller chapters, there are normally not that many participants. For example, in Ottawa, I think we get like about 5 people normally. And the second brevet I did here after I moved here, I showed up and there was only one other person showed up. So don't expect that there will be always somebody that you can draft. So I think you need to be prepared for the ride if you're signing up, I think.
Yeah. I think my first 200 I did with one other person. And there was only the 2 of us on the entire event, which it turned out that was great for me because I got personal coaching for my first 200. It was amazing. But I've also been on brevets where we've had 30 people. So it kind of depends. A lot of the early season brevets, there's a lot more people. And then as the season kind of wears on, the groups kind of, the attendance kind of spreads out a bit.
My first brevet, I showed up hungover, 45 minutes late to the start, which is fine because you got an hour to start. And I had a printed out control sheet that I went around 20 kilometers in the wrong direction. So I had to go 20 kilometers back, and I finished within like 5 minutes of the time being like, I don't know what I got myself into. And I saw nobody the whole ride. I liked it.
So Marty, I think we're at time.
Yeah, so I think we're just about finished. So I just have some concluding remarks. I'd like to thank everyone for attending our virtual symposium this evening. A special thanks to the presenters who provided their personal insight and experience into sport of randonneuring. I would also like to thank Randonneurs Ontario Board of Directors for supporting this project and persevering through these challenging times. For more information about our organization, please check out our website, randonneursontario.ca. A link to this webinar will be posted on our website. We have close to 70 amazing Populaires and Brevets scheduled throughout Ontario for the 2021 season. Please stay safe, and I hope to see you all on the long road. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.